"Do you want more fish?" I asked softly, holding the plate halfway across the table. No one looked up. My daughter-in-law was chatting with my grandson about their upcoming trip. My son scrolled through his phone, nodding absently. The table was full of voices, laughter, movement, but none of them reached me. I set the plate down gently. No one noticed. No one moved over to make space. My chair was still pulled away, angled like I didn't belong there. Every setting at the table was arranged. Bowls, spoons, napkins, glasses. None for me. "Mom, you haven't eaten yet?" my son asked, not unkindly, just casually, as if it wasn't strange. I smiled and shook my head, walked back toward the sink, hands sinking into cold water. Behind me, I heard him ask his wife, "So, what are we doing about the house?" No pause, no glance back. That's when I knew. They had already made the decisions, and I was never part of them. I didn't say anything that night. I washed the dishes slowly, one by one. Listened to the clatter of forks being scraped against empty plates. Laughed at, but not with. When I finally sat down with a small bowl of rice, the conversation had moved on. Vacation plans, my grandson's new school, a renovation in the upstairs bathroom. All things I wasn't asked about. All things that, once upon a time, would have needed me. But now, it felt like I was sitting beside a moving train, not on it. The next morning, I made breakfast. Eggs, toast, sliced oranges. The usual. I laid everything out like I always did. Out of habit, out of love, out of memory. No one came down. At 8:30, I heard the front door open. My son and his wife were leaving, coffee in hand, bags packed. They didn't say goodbye. I stared at the two untouched plates. The eggs had started to harden around the edges. Later that day, I walked into the living room while they were on a call. They didn't see me. "She won't mind," my daughter-in-law said. "She doesn't really follow what's happening anyway." "She's just there," my son replied. "We'll tell her after, no point stressing her out." I stood there, not breathing, not crying, just still. I started to notice the little things, the way they lowered their voices when I entered the room, how the mail was suddenly addressed only to them, how they stopped asking what I wanted for dinner, how my name wasn't on the Wi-Fi password sheet anymore. One evening, I brought up the school change. I said, gently, "I didn't know you were moving, Luke. That's a big change, isn't it?" My daughter-in-law smiled, that polite, distant kind. "Oh yes, we've been planning it for months. Better district, more modern." I nodded. "Just wish I'd known. I like to be involved." She laughed lightly. "You've got enough to think about, Mom. We've got it handled." We. That word kept echoing. We. As if I were outside of it. As if I hadn't been part of the original we that built this home. I had scrubbed the floors of this house when they were just newlyweds, painted the nursery while pregnant with their father, paid the down payment with my retirement savings, and now I was a shadow with warm hands. One afternoon, I found my favorite mug missing, the one with the little yellow birds. I searched all the cabinets, all the shelves. When I asked, my daughter-in-law said, "Oh, it cracked last week. I tossed it." I stared at her. She didn't flinch, didn't ask if I wanted to keep it, didn't tell me. It was just gone. That same week, they had friends over for dinner. I cooked. I wasn't asked to, but I did. As they laughed in the dining room, I stood in the kitchen doorway, holding a dish of rice. No one looked at me. No one asked me to sit. Eventually, I slid the rice onto the table and walked upstairs. The next morning, I found the guest towels, the ones I'd embroidered myself, stacked in a box in the garage. "Making space," my daughter-in-law said. "For what?" She smiled. "For the new decor. We're redoing the bathroom, remember?" I started forgetting where I put things. Not because I was old, because I was erased. I would place my reading glasses on the counter and come back to find them gone. My chair in the living room had been moved twice, now tucked behind the couch, half blocked by a lamp. One time, I asked about it. "Oh, sorry," she said. "It just felt crowded. I used to sit there every night with Luke. But now, the new layout didn't have room for me. They spoke about me like I wasn't in the room. She's tired. She's set in her ways. She means well. Each phrase a polite shovelful of dirt over who I used to be. I began writing things down. Not because I'd forget, but because no one else seemed to remember them. I kept a little notebook in my apron pocket, noted the day they changed the locks without telling me, the time they sold the side table my husband built, the day they moved all the family photo albums into storage without asking which ones I wanted to keep. One night, Luke came to me with a drawing. It was of the house, our house. 4 figures stood in front of it: Mommy, Daddy, Luke, and a dog. No grandma. When I asked him where I was, he said, "Oh, I think you were upstairs." It wasn't his fault. Children draw what they see. And clearly, I wasn't seen. I tried to speak to my son. Late one night, I knocked on his study door. He looked surprised. "Everything okay?" I sat down slowly. I want to help. I know I'm getting older, but I'm still here. I want to be part of things." He smiled in that patient way he used to have when he was 5 and didn't understand why I cried during the news. "Mom, of course you are. Don't overthink it. Don't overthink it." But what was I supposed to think when I wasn't part of any choice, any conversation, any photograph? I stopped setting the table, stopped offering to cook. They didn't notice. They didn't ask why. One day, I overheard my daughter-in-law on the phone. "Yes, it's fine. She's quiet, mostly stays out of the way." That's what I had become. Quiet. Out of the way. It started small. My daughter-in-law brought home a scarf one afternoon. Pale blue, soft, not expensive, but new. She placed it on the kitchen table where I slicing carrots. "Thought of you when I saw this," she said, almost shy. I looked up, unsure. She smiled, not forcing it, not fake, just gentle. It had been months since she'd brought me anything. Months since anyone had. Later that week, my son asked if I wanted to come with them to the grocery store. I stared at him for a moment too long. He shifted his weight. "Just thought it'd be good to get some air, that's all." I nodded, quietly. In the car, no one talked much. But my grandson leaned his head on my shoulder at one red light. It felt like home, just for a second. At dinner, they asked me about a recipe. "The soup," she said, "the one with the ginger. Can you show me sometime?" I blinked, then smiled. Of course. And when she actually followed through, stood beside me in the kitchen 2 days later, asked questions, took notes, I felt something shift in my chest. Maybe it had just been stress. Maybe they didn't mean to shut me out. Maybe this was the return. I started setting the table again. Nothing big, just 2 plates, then 3, then 4. Someone rearranged the chairs to include mine again. They started waiting before eating. One morning, my daughter-in-law brought me tea. "I know you like it with honey," she said. I nearly cried, but I just nodded. "Thank you." My son asked if I wanted to come with them to Luke's parent-teacher conference. I hadn't been to one in 2 years. He said, "We figured you might have questions too." That night, I opened the cabinet and found my old yellow bird mug had been replaced. An identical one.
Not the same, but enough. There was laughter again, soft, shared. I told myself, don't be cold, don't overthink it, let them try. And for a little while, I did. I found myself humming in the mornings. I trimmed the roses by the front step, picked up thread to mend my blouse, cleaned out a drawer I'd been avoiding. Small signs that something inside me believed again. One Sunday, they took me to brunch. We talked about old family vacations, about Luke's soccer team. My son said, "Remember that time we got stuck in the rain at Yosemite? You made hot chocolate with a travel kettle." I laughed. He smiled. I felt seen again. They started involving me in little things, picking colors for the new bathroom tiles, reviewing the grocery list.
I heard my name spoken with warmth again. Let's ask Mom. See what Grandma thinks. Mom might like this one better. It wasn't loud, but it was there. One afternoon, my daughter-in-law gave me a small envelope. Inside was a spa voucher. "Just for you," she said. "You deserve a little break." I stared at her. She chuckled nervously. "Don't worry, we're not kicking you out. Just a thank you for everything." I thanked her, but inside, something tightened. Not fear, not suspicion, just awareness. A few days later, I was helping Luke with homework. He asked, "Are you going to live with us forever?" I smiled. "Why do you ask?" He shrugged. "Mom said something about the new guest room. Said it's going to be ready before summer." I blinked. "A new guest room?" He nodded. "Yeah, where your room is now. She said it's going to be, like, for visitors and stuff." Later that night, I asked gently, "What's the new guest room plan?" My daughter-in-law froze for half a second, then smiled. "Oh, just thinking ahead, in case friends come stay, you know." She didn't meet my eyes. I said nothing more. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I went to the hall closet, opened the bottom drawer where we kept property paperwork. I wasn't snooping. I was remembering. Inside was a folder labeled Upstairs Conversion Guest Suite Design. I opened it. Diagrams, paint swatches, furniture layouts, and in the margin, a note in my son's handwriting. "Move Mom's dresser to garage storage." The next day, I was quiet. She brought me coffee. He offered to drive me to my doctor's appointment. I nodded, said thank you. But something inside had cooled again. Maybe it wasn't about forgetting me. Maybe it was about replacing me. Softly, politely, with kindness so gentle it wouldn't bruise the skin, only the soul. I began listening more carefully. The words they used, the silences between them. They weren't cruel, just conclusive. I was included again, but only when it fit. Only when I didn't disrupt the story they'd already decided to live. It's strange, realizing love can become logistics, that care can mask choreography, that sometimes people bring you tea to soften the blow they haven't yet delivered. So I smiled, kept cooking, kept listening, but inside I began saving every detail again, just in case the warmth was only meant to keep me still. It felt almost normal again. Breakfast was on the table by 8. The radio hummed low from the corner. Luke asked me about a science project. My daughter-in-law showed me curtain samples on her phone. And my son? He hugged me when he came home from work. "Long day," he said, then added, "Glad you're here." I smiled, but something didn't reach his eyes. For a while, I convinced myself I was just being sensitive, old, suspicious, tired. But then I noticed the way conversations paused when I walked into a room. Not abruptly, not rudely, just recalibrated. Like my presence shifted the balance of what they wanted to say. One afternoon, my daughter-in-law invited me to a community center yoga class. "We can go together," she said. "It's good for joints." I said yes. We went. It was fine. But she didn't talk to me on the drive there. Only smiled politely when I tried to start a story from my past. I watched her more than I stretched. And when we left, she asked me to wait by the car while she ran back in. 15 minutes. I never asked why.
My bedroom door started creaking again. I mentioned it to my son one morning over coffee. He nodded, said he'd fix it. It's been 3 weeks. The door still creaks, but now only when I close it. I caught sight of the new family calendar one day. They keep it in the hallway, big, white, color-coded. Every name had a column: Luke, James, Maya. No mom, no grandma. I looked twice. It wasn't that they'd missed a week. It was that I'd never been on it. They started going out more. Quick errands, just us, team dinners. I offered to stay with Luke, but he was always already scheduled to go to a friend's. I offered to cook, but meals arrived in brown bags with logos. At night, they still smiled, still poured me tea, still asked, "How was your day?" But the kindness tasted like packaging, pre-selected, predictable. I began counting how many times a day someone actually waited for my answer. Often, they didn't. The mail changed again. A letter came for James and Maya Stone, my son and daughter-in-law. No mention of me, even though I was the one who still paid the water bill. I asked about the upcoming trip to the lake house. We used to go every spring. "Oh, we figured it
Might be too much for you," she said. "Long drive, cold nights." I nodded, but I wasn't invited. I stayed home and watered the plants, and wondered when exactly I became a factor to manage, not a person to ask. Luke showed me a drawing one evening. This time I was in it, sitting in a chair by a window, alone. He said, "That's you, Grandma. You're always reading." I smiled, but I hadn't read in weeks. I just sat where they left me. They began making space again. I noticed a large storage box by the stairs. My photo albums, the real ones with glue and yellowed tape, had been placed inside. No one told me. I found them when I bent down to tie my shoe. I asked, "Are these being donated?" My daughter-in-law froze. "No, just organizing." But they were stacked with 3 other boxes labeled "Declutter Upstairs." Mine was labeled "Mom, Misk." One afternoon, I watched them talk from across the garden. He leaned toward her. She looked tense. Then they both looked at me. When I raised my hand to wave, they quickly turned away. That night, they invited me to dinner. At a restaurant. "Your favorite," my son said. I got dressed slowly, put on earrings, brushed my hair. At the table, they ordered wine, complimented my blouse, asked about my childhood. For a moment, I forgot the creaky door, the guest room plans, the labels on the boxes. For a moment, it felt like I mattered again. Then the server brought the bill, and Maya quietly slid her card over it, blocking mine with a smile. "Tonight's our treat." I thanked her, but later that night I checked the bank app on my phone. My grocery card, the one they often used, had been used for a reservation deposit at the same restaurant 4 days ago. They knew they were taking me out, but used my own money to treat me. It wasn't about the money. It was about the story they wanted me to believe. I began keeping notes again, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed to stay awake. It's strange how you can live with people who smile at you, say your name, ask about your day, and still feel like a ghost wearing skin. I told myself it wasn't proof, not yet, but every kindness came with something beneath it, a tension in the air, a quick glance, a missing photo. One morning, I walked into the laundry room and saw her on the phone. "Yeah," she said, "it's still her name on the utility accounts, but we're slowly shifting that. Can't do it all at once." I stepped back before she saw me. Slowly shifting. Can't do it all at once. I stopped humming in the mornings. It started with a phone call. I wasn't listening. I was folding laundry in the next room. The door was slightly open, just enough. My daughter-in-law's voice was low. "No, she hasn't noticed.
She never really pays attention to that stuff. Pause. We'll talk to her once everything's finalized. I mean, what could she do at this point? Silence. Then a soft laugh. I didn't move, didn't breathe, held a sock in my hand like it was evidence. They were talking about me, and something was being finalized. I finished folding the laundry, placed it quietly on the end of my bed. That night, I asked no questions. I just listened harder. The next day, I opened the kitchen drawer to grab my notepad, the one I always used for shopping lists. It was gone. In its place, a new tablet. My son walked in. "Oh yeah, we upgraded you. You can just use the app now." I blinked. "What about the pad?" He shrugged. "Recycled it. You were always losing it anyway." I had never lost it. Not once. I opened the pantry later. The tea tins were rearranged. My favorite had been moved to the back, behind things I couldn't reach. I didn't say anything, just reached for the step stool. But it was gone too. At dinner, I asked where the stool went. My daughter-in-law smiled too quickly. "Oh, it was just cluttering the kitchen. You can ask if you need something." I nodded. Inside, something slid out of place. Another night, I was heading upstairs when I heard them in the living room. "The equity's already split," my son said. She replied, "And she hasn't questioned it?" "No, I told you. She thinks we're just remodeling. She signed where I pointed." Pause. She trusts me. I gripped the banister so
Hard, my knuckles ached. Trust. The thing I'd poured into him since he could barely walk. The thing I'd never held back, even when he made mistakes. Even when he lied about school, or money, or that girl in college. Trust, like breath. Now used like a tool. I looked through my drawer that night, pulled out the papers he'd handed me 2 months ago, the ones he said were for a refinancing application. I'd signed. Of course I did. Didn't read every line. Didn't think I needed to. Now I read every word and saw it. The transfer of interest, the partial change in ownership, my name reduced to a reference point, not a decision maker. I sat with the papers in my lap until midnight, then put them back. Didn't say a word. I tested small things, left a light on in the hallway, one they always turned off. It stayed on all day, until I turned it off myself. Left a bag of groceries out, waiting to be noticed. No one did. My physical presence was tolerated, but my preferences had become irrelevant. One night, Luke came home upset. He threw his backpack down, stomped into the hallway. "I don't want to live here anymore," he yelled. His mother followed, frazzled. "Luke, hey, what's going on?" "I want to go back to Grandma's house." I froze. She snapped, "You are at Grandma's house." He shouted back, "No, her real house, the one with the apple tree." She turned and saw me. We locked eyes for a second. She forced a smile. I think he just misses routine. I went upstairs, opened the bottom drawer of my dresser, pulled out the keys to the old house, still on the same rusted ring, still warm in my palm. I hadn't been back since we moved, since they convinced me it was too big, too lonely, too much. Now I wondered who it had been too much for. A few days later, I received a notice in the mail. Final confirmation of title adjustment. My hands shook as I opened it. My name was gone. Completely. Not even a co-owner. Just a witness. I stood in the living room, the letter fluttering in my hand like a ghost. My son walked in. "Everything okay?" I looked at him. He didn't flinch, just waited. I smiled. "Yes, just mail." That night, I dreamed of my husband. He didn't say anything in the dream, just looked at me from across a room we used to share. And for the first time in years, I woke up crying. Not from grief, but from realization. They had moved on without me, while still keeping me here, like a vase no one liked but couldn't throw away. At breakfast, I asked Luke if he wanted pancakes.
He said, "That's not what we eat now, Grandma." And I nodded. But something in me said, "Not we, just you all." I sat in the backyard that afternoon. The wind blew soft. The sky had that late spring blue. I held the title notice in my lap, and I thought of all the times I had handed over something, not knowing it would never come back. My time, my body, my money, my name. Now I was handing over my place, not just in the house, but in the story. I heard a screen door click open behind me. My daughter-in-law's voice. "Tea?" I turned, smiled. Maybe later. It was a Thursday. Quiet. The kind of quiet that feels just slightly off. My daughter-in-law had taken Luke to a dentist appointment. My son was working in his home office. I was dusting the bookshelf in the hallway, something I hadn't done in a while. I knocked over a stack of papers. They scattered across the floor. As I knelt to pick them up, one of the folders slid open. I didn't mean to read it, but my eyes landed on the heading. Title and ownership transfer, property reassignment. I froze. There it was again. My address, my home. The same papers I had signed months ago, but this version was final. Stamped, dated, filed. No signature line for me. No mention of my name anywhere. I sat down right there on the hallway floor. The air felt thick, my chest hollow. I flipped to the second page. A note in the margin read, "Finalized. All assets in James and Maya's name. Clean title for resale or refinance." Resale? I blinked. I heard footsteps upstairs. The hallway clock ticked. It sounded louder than usual. I took the folder with me, closed the door to my room, sat on the edge of the bed and read every single page. It wasn't just the house. It was the car, the savings account, the life insurance policy I'd kept open for Luke. Everything.
Everything. Women 30-40s who know how pain hides in silence. Everything. Bit by bit, over the last 2 years, they had shifted ownership, rewritten my presence into absence, and I hadn't even noticed. No, that wasn't true. I had noticed. I had just explained it away, because I wanted to believe in my son. I stared at the mirror. I didn't look angry. I looked still, like something frozen in the middle of melting. Later that afternoon, I went into his office. He looked up from his laptop, surprised. "Hey, Mom, need something?" I held up the folder. This fell off the shelf in the hallway. He blinked, then smiled. "Oh, thanks. Maya must have been organizing. Appreciate it." He didn't flinch, didn't ask what I'd seen, didn't explain, just smiled. That smile broke something in me, because now I knew he knew, that I knew, and he wasn't sorry, just relieved I hadn't made a scene. That night at dinner, I served everyone their plates. We ate in peace. Luke asked me about a story from when his dad was little. I told it. We laughed. My son looked at me with that same polite affection. And all I could think was, he believes I won't fight back. That's the mistake. The next morning, I went to the bank. I checked the balances. Everything was as the papers said. I had access to one account, the smallest one, the one meant for day-to-day. What they called her allowance when talking to friends, I now realized. That same afternoon, I visited the lawyer's office, the one my husband and I had used years ago. The receptionist remembered me. She smiled kindly. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, "but I'd like to speak to someone about reclaiming ownership." Quietly. The young lawyer, new, maybe late 20s, listened to everything, didn't interrupt. Then he said, "Technically, if you signed willingly, it's hard to reverse. But if you were misled, or coerced, or unaware of what was being signed, there may be options. especially if there's a pattern. I showed him the folder. He skimmed it, then paused at the notes. "This wasn't standard refinancing," he said. "No," I replied. "It was a quiet replacement of me." I left with a list of next steps. He told me not to say anything yet. People tend to hide evidence when they sense confrontation coming. I nodded. I won't confront. That evening, they were planning a vacation. I overheard them in the kitchen. The agency said May is best. Cheaper rates, Luke's off school then. "Perfect," my son said. "Once everything's under our name, we can sell and downsize. Use the money to travel more." Pause. "Should we tell her?" "Not yet." They laughed. Lightly, warmly, warm, like planning a picnic. I sat in the den with a notebook, wrote it all down. Every date, every phrase, every expression. I didn't cry. I didn't storm upstairs. I just wrote. I began making copies of things, bank records, emails, contracts. Took photos of sticky notes they left on the fridge. Call realtor Monday. Meeting with estate guy at 3. Make sure mom doesn't mention old address. One morning, I found my wedding ring missing. I'd taken it off to wash dishes, left it by the sink. I searched everywhere, asked. They hadn't seen it. But later, I noticed my daughter-in-law wearing a new gold band on her right hand. Not my ring, but close. Close enough that I stopped asking. They offered to take me to lunch that Sunday. To get some fresh air, my son said. The same words he used when we first moved into this house. Back then, I believed him. This time, I just smiled. At lunch, he raised his glass. "To family," he said. I raised mine too. But in my mind, I heard, "To the part you didn't see coming." They thought I still trusted them, and I let them think that. I still made dinner, still folded laundry, still asked, "How was your day?" My voice never rose. My hands never shook. But every sentence they said, I filed away in my mind. Every change in schedule, every closed door, every new delivery. I became the quietest person in the house, but the one who saw everything. I got a new notebook, not the usual kind. This one had a black cover and no labels. I kept it hidden in the linen closet, behind old towels. Each night, I wrote in it. Everything. April 12. They met with someone named Catherine from the bank. Her business card left on the entryway table. Looked into her online, estate planner. April 15. Maya said, "If it doesn't appraise high enough, we'll just sell the land separate." April 18. James took a call on the patio. Said, "Yeah, she still thinks it's just a title shuffle," then laughed. I changed my patterns slightly. Started waking earlier. Checked the mail before they did. Looked through the trash. Yes, even that. Found shredded statements, loan discussions. A printed email that said, "Transfer of ownership cleared. Property eligible for full refinancing or sale under current holders." I took pictures. Saved them in a private cloud folder my husband once taught me to set up, just in case. I remembered. He used to say, "You never know when the backup is the only thing left." One evening, I made banana bread, the same recipe Maya once said she loved. She smiled. "Smells amazing, Mom." I served it warm. She took a bite. Then asked casually, "So, any plans for the summer?" I looked her in the eye. "No," I said, "just here." She smiled wider. "Good," she said. "We're hoping for a little more flexibility by then." They had no idea what I knew. That made me invisible again, but this time by design. At night, I pretended to watch TV. They sat behind me, whispering. I let the volume play just loud enough to seem distracted, but I heard. "Should we tell her before or after the appraisal?" "Let's wait. She gets sentimental. It'll just complicate things." Complicate. That's what I'd become. An inconvenience. A human delay. I bought a small voice recorder. Nothing fancy. I wore it on a chain beneath my blouse. Whenever they spoke about the house, the money, the next steps, I kept my face blank. But inside, I hit record. I met again with the lawyer. We went over the documents, the photos, the recordings. He said quietly, "You've built a strong case, especially with the pattern of manipulation and misrepresentation." I nodded. He added, "But we'll need to move carefully. They could start hiding things if they catch on." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm still baking banana bread." I went to my old house, the one with the apple tree. It hadn't been sold yet, still on the market, still under my name, the one thing they hadn't gotten to. I walked through the rooms, touched the old dresser, opened the windows, let the wind come in. I stood in the kitchen where I once rocked my son to sleep, and I cried. But just once. Then I cleaned it, wiped every surface, made a list of what needed repairs. I wasn't going to leave it to them. Back at the other house, their house now in their minds, I resumed my role. I played soft music. I asked about Luke's school. I complimented Maya's haircut. Each act was a stitch in the mask I wore daily, but inside, I was sewing something stronger. One night, I found the new deed. It was in a drawer in James' office. I wasn't snooping, I was confirming. And there it was, everything signed, stamped, filed, except one thing, a note at the bottom. Pending final agreement with current resident required for uncontested listing. That's what I was now, a current resident, not a mother, not a grandmother, not a co-owner, just a technicality. That weekend, they hosted friends. I stayed mostly upstairs, except to serve drinks. I heard Maya say, "Yeah, the place is finally in our name. Took a while, but worth it. We're thinking of remodeling the kitchen next." Someone asked, "And your mom-in-law?" She laughed lightly. "She's sweet, just not super involved anymore. Kind of fading out." Fading out. Later that night, I washed the dishes slowly, each glass quieter than the next, and I whispered to myself, "I'm not fading, I'm waiting." It began with a letter, a white envelope, no logo, just my name, my full name, written in calm, even print. I placed it in the center of the kitchen table one morning, right between the cereal bowl and the coffee mug. James walked in, kissed my cheek. "Morning." I smiled. "Morning, love." He picked up the envelope absently, opened it. His eyes stopped moving halfway down the page. Silence. He looked up. "What's this?" I turned back to the sink. "Something from the lawyer," I said. "Just a clarification." "A clarification?" "Yes," I said, rinsing a glass. "About who owns what, who signed what, and what might count as undue influence." He didn't speak for a long time. Then he placed the paper back down, carefully. "Are you—" He stopped. I dried my hands, turned to him. "I'm just getting clarity. You always said I forget things, so now I write them down." That evening, Maya was unusually quiet. She didn't ask about dinner, didn't mention Luke's homework. When I sat beside her on the couch, she shifted slightly. I noticed. She knew something. The next day, I called the bank and froze the joint card, the one they used for household expenses, the one I had funded for years. No warning, no explanation, just deactivate. A few hours later, I heard James in the kitchen. "Declined?" he muttered. "That doesn't make sense." He opened the banking app. I heard him curse under his breath. Then footsteps. "Mom?" I turned from the oven. "Yes." Did something happen with the account?" I nodded. Just simplifying. Why? I looked at him. Because it was never simple. You just made it look that way. He didn't have a response, just left the room. The next week, I removed my name from the school pickup list. Luke was no longer my responsibility to manage. I let Maya know politely via text. Her reply came an hour later. "Is everything okay?" I didn't respond. I went to my old house again, this time with the locksmith. We changed the locks, updated the alarm system, cleaned out the rooms. I moved a few things in slowly, one drawer at a time, one blanket, one photo, one mug. The garden had weeds. I cleared them. The front step needed painting. I painted it, not for resale, for me. At the lawyer's office, we filed a formal notice, petition to reclaim property through evidence of manipulation, coercion, and breach of trust. I attached the notes, the recordings, the witness statements, the bank transfers, the timestamps. Back home, I continued my act. Still cooked, still folded towels, still asked how Luke was doing. But I no longer answered questions about money, home repairs, insurance, or the summer trip. When asked, I just smiled and said, "I'm not involved in that anymore." Maya tried to corner me one night. "Are we okay?" I nodded. "Of course." "Because something feels off." I tilted my head. "Is that something you usually feel before or after you move someone out of their own home?" Her face dropped. But I didn't raise my voice, didn't explain. I simply stood. "Good night." James knocked on my door 2 days later. "I think we should talk." I opened it halfway. "About what?" "This tension?" I shook my head. "This isn't tension, sweetheart. This is silence. You just never noticed it before." He rubbed his jaw. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know," I said. "You meant to erase me quietly. That's different." He swallowed. "I don't know what you want me to say." "You don't have to say anything." I handed him a folded paper. He opened it, read it. His mouth went dry. "Notice of legal challenge, misuse of power of attorney, pending court review." He looked up. "You're suing me?" I shook my head. "I'm correcting you." He didn't sleep at home that night. I knew because I checked the driveway at 2 a.m. Only my car was there. I didn't feel triumphant, just calm, like a fog had lifted. 2 days later, he tried again. "Can't we just settle this privately, as a family?" I smiled. "You already decided what this family looked like. I'm just updating the paperwork." Luke asked me one morning, "Grandma, are we moving?" I knelt to tie his shoes. "I'm not sure, baby." "But Mom said we might have to. She was crying." I looked into his eyes. "I know." He leaned forward, whispered, "Are you mad?" I hugged him. "No, I'm awake." That week, the lawyer sent notice to halt any resale or refinancing. We attached the trust papers, the original ones. My husband had protected me better than they expected. They just didn't know where to look. I did. They stopped whispering around me. Now, they just stayed quiet. Maya cooked dinner once, burned the rice. No one commented. James didn't come to the table. I ate alone. For the first time in years, it tasted like peace. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, but in presence. It echoed differently. Everything I said sounded louder. Everything they said sounded thinner. I sat on the left, my lawyer beside me, calm and steady. The papers stacked in perfect order. James and Maya sat across from us. They didn't hold hands, didn't speak. They avoided my eyes. Good. I didn't come here to be looked at. I came to be heard. The judge asked the first question. "Mrs. Stone, can you walk us through how these changes were made to the trust and property ownership?" I stood slowly. No drama, just breath. "Yes, Your Honor. I walked them through every date, every form, every simple signature, every moment they said, "Don't worry, Mom." I didn't embellish, didn't dramatize. I let the timeline speak for itself. I handed over copies of the documents, highlighted names, transfers, timestamps. The judge flipped through them in silence. I continued. "Your Honor, I was led to believe these were standard documents for insurance, for refinancing, for tax updates. I was not told they were permanent transfers removing me from my own home." Then I played the first recording. Their voices filled the room. "She signed where I pointed. She trusts me. We'll sell once everything's in our name." James shifted in his seat. Maya went pale. They looked at their attorney, but there was no objection, just silence. I showed screenshots next, bank accounts, email printouts, the text Maya had sent about me. "She's sweet, just doesn't realize she's in the way." The judge leaned forward. "Did you confront them during this time?" I shook my head. "No, I documented. I wanted the truth to speak louder than my voice ever could." James was asked to respond. He stood, stammered. I didn't mean to trick her. I thought we were simplifying things, making it easier. She was always forgetting things." My lawyer stood. "May we submit Exhibit G?" Another document. My full psychiatric evaluation. No cognitive impairment. No signs of mental decline. The judge reviewed it. "You claimed your mother was forgetful. Medical records say otherwise." James didn't answer. Maya tried next. "She said she wanted us to have the house. She even told Luke she might leave someday." I looked at the judge. "I never signed over my trust. That was never verbalized, never agreed upon. And even if it was, intent without documentation is not transfer." The judge nodded. "Correct." We moved to the financial manipulation. The grocery account they used for personal vacations. The car payment that was never mine but somehow charged to my old card. The insurance policy I found canceled without notice. Every detail presented. Every dollar accounted for. They had made me look small, and I made every paper stand tall in response. I read from my notes. On March 7th, my daughter-in-law said, "We're almost there, once the last signature's done." That was before they asked me to sign a final form labeled Medical Emergency Contact Update, which turned out to be a release of claim to my name on the house title. The room was silent. No one interrupted. At the end, I gave the final document, a handwritten letter, not to the court, to Luke. "Dear Luke, I know none of this is your fault. I love you. I always will. But sometimes grown-ups forget what love is supposed to protect. This isn't about blame. It's about truth. So one day, when you're ready, you'll know. Grandma didn't leave you. They left me." The judge cleared their throat. "Court will reconvene tomorrow for final statements. We will be reviewing these documents and recordings in the interim." I nodded, stood, and left the room. Outside, the air was warm. Soft breeze, city noise, real life. My lawyer turned to me. That was everything we needed. I nodded, but I didn't feel victory. I felt clarity.
A wide, steady stillness. Back at home, their home, James had packed a small bag. "I'll stay at a hotel tonight." I nodded. He paused. "You don't have to do this, Mom." I turned. "I already did. Now the court just gets to catch up." Maya didn't come out of the bedroom. Luke gave me a quiet hug before bed. He didn't say anything. But I think he knew. Maybe not all of it, but enough. The next day, we returned to court. The judge read the summary aloud. "Pattern of deception confirmed. Financial and emotional manipulation documented.
Legal ownership remains contested, but clear signs of coercion and breach of fiduciary responsibility exist. The final ruling? Reversal of the last 3 title transfers, freeze of any assets sold under contested authority, restoration of my co-ownership, and a civil case pending. They didn't even look at me as we left. But I didn't need them to. I walked outside and let the light hit my face. Not sun, not spotlight, just daylight. I was never trying to ruin them. I just wanted my name back, my place, myself. And now I had it. The first morning in the old house felt too quiet. No footsteps above, no muffled voices behind a door, no sound of someone else deciding something without me. Just birds, and the creak of the window as I opened it. The air smelled like dust and freedom. I made coffee, real coffee, not the watered-down brand Maya bought in bulk. I poured it slowly into my favorite mug, the chipped one James said made the shelf look messy. It was still here, exactly where I left it. I walked out to the garden. The apple tree was in bloom. Small white petals floated down like snow. I ran my hand along the trunk. Alive, still bearing fruit. I trimmed the hedge, swept the porch, opened every window in the house, let the air move freely like I never could in those last years. I made a list that afternoon. Not a to-do list, a to-be list. Be alone without feeling lonely. Be quiet without feeling silenced. Be tired and rest, not apologize. Be free to change my mind. I smiled at the last one. That had always been a luxury I didn't allow myself. I didn't talk to James or Maya for weeks. They didn't call. Only one message came through. Hope you're okay. Luke asks about you. I didn't reply. Not yet. Not because I was angry, because I was healing. And healing doesn't rush. I started writing again. Short entries, small moments. The first cup of tea on a rainy morning. The way the floor creaked differently when it was only me. The memory of Luke chasing butterflies here. I bought a journal, hardcover, maroon. It felt like a commitment to myself. Sometimes I'd cry for no reason. Not out of grief, but because of the weight of my own quiet. I had never realized how loud everyone else had been, how loud I had forced myself to be, just to keep up. Now there was only space and time. I took a pottery class. The instructor asked why I joined. I said, to learn how to shape things with my hands. He smiled. That's the best reason. I made a bowl that collapsed on one side. He said, it's still a bowl, just a bowl with character. I kept it. I donated half my wardrobe, all the clothes Maya bought me for special occasions, neutral tones, soft cardigans. I filled a bag and took it to the shelter. When they asked if I needed a receipt, I said no. I'm not writing this off, I smiled. I'm writing it down as a release. Some nights I'd make dinner just for me. Set the table, cloth napkin, wine glass, a flower in a little vase. Not for show, for care. On a Tuesday, I painted the kitchen, a warm yellow. It reminded me of early mornings and quiet courage. On a Saturday, I bought a bike. The shopkeeper looked surprised. This model's usually for younger folks. I said, then let's surprise them. I began leaving the front door open during the day. Neighbors waved. Some dropped by. Old friends I hadn't seen in years. People I thought I had lost during the transition. Turns out, they just didn't know where I had gone. Now they did. One of them, Carla, brought peach cobbler. I heard you came back, she said. I smiled. I didn't leave, I said. I just disappeared in silence for too long. She nodded. We sat on the porch, talked for hours, laughed. That night, I slept deeper than I had in months. Luke wrote me a letter. Crayon, shaky handwriting. Dear Grandma, I miss your garden. Can I come see the apples? Love, Luke. I cried reading it, but it wasn't a sad cry. It was something else. Maybe gratitude? Maybe release. I wrote back, of course, anytime. Bring your questions, bring your boots. He came the next weekend. No talk of courts, no talk of houses, just apples, and the sound of his small hands digging in the soil beside mine. I looked at him and thought, this is what I fought for. Not just the land, not the papers, but the right to be remembered by someone who knew me before I was erased. And maybe someday I'll forget how it all fell apart, but I won't forget this. The wind through open windows, the quiet inside my own decisions, the sharpness of betrayal, and the softness of coming home. It's strange what you remember at the end. Not the final arguments, not the signatures, not even the cold click of the door. You remember the quiet, the breath you took before saying nothing, the ache in your throat when you swallowed one more sentence that didn't feel safe to speak. You remember the way your name looked on papers that no longer included it. And you remember how loud your heart was, even when your voice had gone still. I never meant to tell this story. I thought I would carry it quietly, let it dissolve with time, let it turn to memory, then maybe to nothing. But silence, I've learned, is not the same as peace, and forgetting is not the same healing. So I wrote it all down, every part, not for revenge, not for sympathy, but because truth untold becomes a wound, and I've already bled enough. This story is mine, and I'm telling it now because I don't owe them protection anymore. I don't owe anyone a version of mine that fits into their comfort. I don't owe softness where there was harm, or silence where there was theft. To the women who've been rewritten into background characters in their own homes, I see you. To the mothers made to believe their love was conditional on usefulness, I was you. To the wives who were asked to sign, smile, and trust, I trusted. I signed, and I was almost erased for it. Almost. But here's what they didn't count on. That the quietest person at the table is usually the one listening the hardest. That the one they called forgetful would remember every detail, every word, every pause. That the one they left behind would be the one still standing. They thought I would go quietly. I didn't. I stayed. I spoke. And now, I'm free. Not in the way people mean when they post pictures of oceans and sunsets with captions like healing, but in the real way. The kind where you sit with everything. The kind where you hurt without hiding. The kind where you finally say, this happened. It was real. It was wrong. And it's over. I don't need to forgive them to move on. I don't need closure, because I am the one who closed the door. Luke comes to visit. Sometimes we talk. Sometimes we just sit in the garden. He told me once, Mom said you left because you were tired. I smiled. She's not wrong, I said. I was tired, just not the way she meant. Sometimes I get letters from women who read my story. They ask how I stayed so calm, how I knew what to do. I tell them the truth. I didn't. I was scared. I was hurt. I was ashamed. But I wrote things down. I paid attention. And when the time came, I chose myself. Not loudly, but fully. So here is my final word. I was not difficult. I was not dramatic. I was not forgetful. I was aware. And that awareness saved my life.
I used to whisper apologies in my own house. Now I say this, calmly, clearly, and without asking anyone to understand.